Hi, welcome back. My name is Dr. Cheryl Meier, and I'm a psychologist. But today I'm just reading a story to us all, for kids and for adults. It's a George MacDonald story. He's Scottish from the 1800s, and it's called The Princess and the Goblin. It's so old that it's free copyright, so you can download it online and get it yourself and read along if you want, or just listen. We're on page 44 in this book, which is, we had to stop in the middle because I'm only doing around 20-25 minutes for each video. So let's see, this is chapter 6, The Little Miner. We're in the middle of it. And I got a different candle. I just put it to the side. It's the Guardian Angel candle. But here, I'll show you. It's super cute to what we're reading right now too. I mean, it's the real picture is. My grandmother loved this picture. It's the boy and the girl on the bridge and the angel watching over. But it's my only one that was low enough. So hopefully you can just concentrate on that. The flame, if you want to watch something while the story is going. Welcome. All right. So this is the third video. They soon had her between them, the princess, Irene, holding a hand of each. "Now let's run," said the nurse. "No, no," said the little miner. "That's the worst thing you can do. If you hadn't run before, you would not have lost your way. And if you run now, they will be after you in a moment." "I don't want to run," said Irene. "You don't think of me," said the nurse. "Yes, I do, Ludi. The boy says they won't touch us if we don't run." "Yes, but if they know at the house that I've kept you out so late, I shall be turned away, and that would break my heart." "Turned away? Ludi, who would turn you away?" "Your papa, child." "But I'll tell him it was all my fault, and you know it was, Ludi. He won't mind that. I'm sure he won't." "Then I'll cry and go down on my hands and my knees to him and beg him not to take away my own dear Ludi." The nurse was comforted at hearing this and said no more, and they went on walking pretty fast, but taking care not to run a step. "I want to talk to you," said Irene to the little miner, "but it's so awkward. I don't know your name." "My name's Curdie, little princess." "What a funny name, Curdie. What more?" "Curdie Peterson." What's your name, please?" "Irene." "And what more?" "I don't know what more. What more is my name, Ludi? Princesses haven't got more than one name. They don't want it." "Oh, then, Curdie, you must call me just Irene and no more." "No, indeed," said the nurse indignantly. "He shall do no such thing." "What shall he call me then, Ludi?" "Your Royal Highness." "My Royal Highness? What's that?" "No, no, Ludi, I won't be called names. I don't like them. You told me yourself it's only rude children that call names. And I'm sure Curdie wouldn't be rude." "Curdie, my name's Irene." "Well, Irene," said Curdie, with a glance at the nurse, which showed he enjoyed teasing her, "it's very kind of you to let me call you anything. I like your name very much." He expected the nurse to interfere again, but he soon saw that she was too frightened to speak. She was staring at something a few yards before them in the middle of the path, where it narrowed between the rocks so that only one could pass at a time. "It is very much kinder of you to go out of your way to take us home," said Irene. "I'm not going out of my way yet," said Curdie. "It's on the other side of those rocks. The path turns off to my father's." "You wouldn't think of leaving us until we're safe home, I'm sure," gasped the nurse. "Of course not," said Curdie. "You dear, good, kind Curdie, I'll give you a kiss when we get home," said the princess. The nurse gave her a great pull by the hand she held, but at that instant the something in the middle of the way, which had looked like a great lump of earth brought down by the rain, began to move. One after another it shot out 4 long legs like 2 arms and 2 legs, but it was now too dark to tell what they were. The nurse began to tremble from head to foot. Irene clasped Curdy's hand yet faster, and Curdy began to sing again. 1, 2, hit and hew, 3, 4, blast and bore, 5, 6, there's a fix, 7, 8, hold it straight, 9, 10, hit again, hurry, scurry, bother, smother. There's a toad in the road, smash it, squash it, fry it, dry it, you're another, up and off, there's enough, As he uttered the last words, Curdy let go his hold of his companion and rushed at the thing in the road, as if he would trample it underfoot. It gave a great spring and ran straight up the rocks like a huge spider. Curdy turned back laughing and took Irene's hand again. She grasped his very tight, but said nothing until they had passed the rocks. A few yards more, and she found herself on a part of the road she knew, and was able to speak again. "Do you know, Curdy, I don't quite like your song. It sounds to me rather rude," she said. "Well, perhaps it is," answered Curdy. "I never thought of that. It's a way we have. We do it because they don't like it." "Who don't like it?" "The Cobbs, as we call them." "Don't," said the nurse. "Why not?" said Curdy. "I beg you won't. Please don't." "Oh, if you ask me that way, of course I won't. Though I don't a bit know why. Look, there are the lights of your great house down below. You'll be at home in 5 minutes now." Nothing more happened. They reached home in safety. Nobody had missed them or even known they had gone out, and they arrived at the door belonging to their part of the house without anyone seeing them. The nurse was rushing in with a hurried and not over-gracious good night to Curdy, but the princess pulled her hand from hers and was just throwing her arms round Curdy's neck when she caught her again and dragged her away. "Looty, Looty, I promised Curdy a kiss," cried Irene. "A princess mustn't give kisses. It's not at all proper," said Looty. "But I promised," said the princess. "There's no occasion. He's only a minor boy. He's a good boy and a brave boy, and he has been very kind to us, Looty. Looty, I promised." "Then you shouldn't have promised. Looty, I promised him a kiss." "Your Royal Highness," said Looty, suddenly growing very respectful, "must come in directly." "Nurse, a princess must not break her word," said Irene, drawing herself up and standing stock still. Looty did not know which the king might count the worse, to let the princess be out after sunset or let her kiss a minor boy. She did not know that, being a gentleman, as many kings have been, he would have counted neither of them the worse. However much he might have disliked his daughter to kiss the minor boy, he would not have had her break her word for all the goblins in creation. I'll show you the picture. I'm just trying to make sure it's on the screen. There we go. But as I say, the nurse was not lady enough to understand this, and so she was in a great difficulty, for if she insisted, someone might hear the princess cry and run to see, and then all would come out. But here Curdy came in again to the rescue. "Never mind, Princess Irene. You mustn't kiss me tonight, but you shan't break your word. I will come another time. You may be sure I will." "Oh, thank you, Curdy," said the princess, and stopped crying. "Good night, Irene." "Good night, Looty," said Curdy, and turned and went out of sight in a moment. "I should like to see him," muttered the nurse, as she carried the princess to the nursery. "You will see him," said Irene. "You may be sure Curdy will keep his word. He's sure to come again." "I should like to see him," repeated the nurse, and said no more. She did not want to open a new case of strife with the princess by saying more plainly what she meant. Glad enough that she had succeeded both in getting home unseen and in keeping the princess from kissing the miner's boy, she resolved to watch her far better in the future. Her carelessness had already doubled the danger she was in. Formerly the goblins were her only fear. Now she had to protect her charge from Curdy as well. Gertie went home chapter 7, called The Mines. Gertie went home whistling. He resolved to say nothing about the princess for fear of getting the nurse into trouble, for while he enjoyed teasing her because of her absurdity, he was careful not to do her any harm. He saw no more of the goblins and was soon fast asleep in his bed. He woke in the middle of the night and thought he heard curious noises outside. He sat up and listened, then got up and opened the door very quietly, went out. When he peeped round the corner, he saw under his own window a group of stumpy creatures, whom he at once recognized by their shape. Hardly, however, had he begun his 1, 2, 3, when they broke asunder, scurried away, and were out of sight. He returned laughing, got into bed again, and was fast asleep in a moment. Reflecting a little over the matter in the morning, he came to the conclusion that, as nothing of that kind had ever happened before, they must be annoyed with him for interfering to protect the princess. By the time he was dressed, however, he was thinking of something quite different, for he did not value the enmity of the goblins in the least. As soon as they had had breakfast, he set off with his father for the mine. They entered the hill by a natural opening under a huge rock, where a little stream rushed out. They followed his course for a few yards, when the passage took a turn and sloped steeply into the heart of the hill. With many angles and windings and branchings off, and sometimes with steps where it came upon a natural gulf, it led them deep into the hill before they arrived at the place where they were at present digging out the precious ore. This was of various kinds, for the mountain was very rich in the better sorts of metals, with flint and steel and tinderbox. They lighted their lamps, then fixed them on their heads, and were soon hard at work with their pickaxes and shovels and hammers. Father and son were at work near each other, but not in the same gang. The passages out of which the ore was dug they called gangs. For when the lode, or vein of ore, was small, one miner would have to dig away alone in a passage no bigger than gave him just room to work, sometimes in uncomfortable, cramped positions. If they stopped for a moment, they could hear everywhere around them, some nearer, some farther, the sounds of their companions burrowing away in all directions in the inside of the great mountain. Some boring holes in the rock in order to blow it up with gunpowder, others shoveling the broken ore into baskets to be carried to the mouth of the mine, others hitting away with their pickaxes. Sometimes, if the miner was in a very lonely part, he would hear only a tap-tapping, no louder than that of a woodpecker, for the sound would come from a great distance off through the solid mountain rock. Here's Gertie and his father walking in. The work was hard at best, for it was very warm underground, but it was not particularly unpleasant, and some of the miners, when they wanted to earn a little more money for a particular purpose, would stop behind the rest and work all night, but you could not tell night from day down there, except for feeling tired and sleepy. For no light of the sun ever came into those gloomy regions. Some who had thus remained behind during the night, although certain there were none of their companions at work, would declare the next morning that they had heard every time they halted for a moment to take a breath, a tap-tapping all about them, as if the mountain were then more full of miners than ever it was during the day, and some in consequence would never stay overnight, for all knew that those were the sounds of the goblins. They worked only at night, for the miners' night was the goblins' day. Indeed, the greater number of the miners were afraid of the goblins, for there were strange stories well known amongst them of the treatment some had received whom the goblins had surprised at their work during the night. The more courageous of them, however, amongst them Peter Peterson and Gertie, who in this took after his father, had stayed in the mine all night again and again, and although they had several times encountered a few stray goblins, had never yet failed in driving them away. As I have indicated already, the chief defense against them was verse, for they hated verse of every kind, and some kinds they could not endure at all. I suspect they could not make any themselves, and this was why they disliked it so much. At all events, those who were most afraid of them were those who could neither make verses themselves, nor remember the verses that other people made for them, while those who were never afraid were those who could make verses for themselves. For although there were certain old rhymes which were very effectual, yet it was well known that a new rhyme, if of the right sort, was even more distasteful to them, and therefore more effectual in putting them to flight. Perhaps my readers may be wondering what the goblins could be about, working all night long, seeing they never carried up the ore and sold it. But when I have informed them concerning what Curdie learned the very next night, they will be able to understand. For Curdie had determined, if his father would permit him, to remain there alone this night, and that for two reasons. First, he wanted to get extra wages, that he might buy a very warm red petticoat for his mother, who had begun to complain of the cold of the mountain air sooner than usual this autumn. And second, he had just a faint hope of finding out what the goblins were about under his window the night before. When he told his father, he made no objection, for he had great confidence in his boy's courage and resources. "I'm sorry I can't stay with you," said Peter, "but I want to go and pay the parson a visit this evening, and besides, I've had a bit of a headache all day." "Oh, I'm sorry for that, father," said Curdie. "Oh, it's not much. You'll be sure to take care of yourself, won't you?" "Yes, father, I will. I'll keep a sharp lookout, I promise you." Curdie was the only one who remained in the mine. About 6 o'clock the rest went away, everyone bidding him good night and telling him to take care of himself, for he was a great favorite with them all. "Don't forget your rhyme," said one. "No, no," answered Curdie. "It doesn't matter if he does," said another, "for he'll only have to make a new one." "Yes, but he mightn't be able to make it fast enough," said another, "and while it was cooking in his head, they might take a mean advantage and set upon him." "I'll do my best," said Curdie. "I'm not afraid." "We all know that," they returned, and they left him. Chapter 8. The Goblins. For some time Curdie worked away briskly, throwing all the ore he had disengaged on the one side behind him, to be ready for carrying out in the morning. He heard a good deal of goblin tapping, but it all sounded far away in the hill, and he paid it little heed. Towards midnight he began to feel rather hungry, so he dropped his pickaxe, got out a lump of bread, which in the morning he had laid in a damp hole in the rock. He sat down on a heap of ore and ate his supper. Then he leaned back for 5 minutes' rest before beginning his work again, and laid his head against the rock. He had not kept the position for 1 minute before he heard something which made him sharpen his ears. It sounded like a voice inside the rock. After a while he heard it again. It was a goblin voice. There could be no doubt about that, and this time he could make out the words. "Hadn't we better be moving?" it said. A rougher and deeper voice replied, "There's no hurry. That wretched little mole won't be through tonight. If he worked ever so hard, he's not by any means at the thinnest place." "But you still think the load does come through into our house?" said the first voice. "Yes, but a good bit further on than he has got to yet. If he had struck a stroke more to the side just here," said the goblin, tapping the very stone, as it seemed to Curdie, against which his head lay, "he would have been through. But he's a couple yards past it now, and if he follows the load, it will be a week before it leads him in. You see it back there, a long way still. Still, perhaps, in case of accident, it would be as well to be getting out of this. Helfer, you'll take the great chest. That's your business, you know." I'll show you the picture. "Yes, Dad," said a third voice, "but you must help me get it on my back. It's awfully heavy, you know." "Well, it isn't just a bag of smoke, I admit. But you're as strong as a mountain, Helfer." "You say so, Dad. I think myself I'm all right, but I could carry 10 times as much if it weren't for my feet." "That is your weak point, I confess, my boy." "Ain't it yours too, Father?" "Well, to be honest, it's a goblin's weakness. Why they come so soft, I declare, I haven't an idea." "Especially when your head's so hard, you know, Father." "Yes, my boy, the Goblin's glory is his head. To think how the fellows up there above, have to put on helmets and things when they go fighting. Ha ha. But why don't we wear shoes like them, Father? I should like it, especially when I've got a chest like this on my head. Well, you see, it's not the fashion. The king never wears shoes. The queen does. Yes, but that's for distinction. The first queen, you see, I mean the king's first wife, wore shoes, of course, because she came from upstairs. And so when she died, the next queen would not be inferior to her, as she called it, and would wear shoes too. It was all pride. She is the hardest in forbidding them to the rest of the women. I'm sure I wouldn't wear them. No, not for that I wouldn't, said the first voice, which was evidently that of the mother of the family. I can't think why either of them should. Didn't I tell you the first was from upstairs? Said the other. That was the only silly thing I ever knew His Majesty guilty of. Why should he marry an outlandish woman like that, one of our natural enemies too? I suppose he fell in love with her. Pooh-pooh, he's just as happy now with the one of his own people. Did she die very soon? They didn't tease her to death, did they? Oh dear no, the king worshipped her very footmarks. What made her die then? Didn't the heir agree with her? She died when the young prince was born. Sorry, I just reacted. How silly of her, we never do that. It must have been because she wore shoes. I don't know that. Why do they wear shoes up there? Now that's a sensible question, and I will answer it. But in order to do so, I must first tell you a secret. I once saw the queen's feet. Without her shoes? Yes, without her shoes. No, did you? How was it? Never you mind how it was. She didn't know I saw them. And what do you think? They had toes. Toes? What's that? You may well ask. I should never have known if I had not seen the queen's feet. Just imagine the ends of her feet were split up in 5 or 6 thin pieces. Oh, horrid! How could the king have fallen in love with her? You forget that she wore shoes. That is just why she wore them. That is why all the men and women, too, upstairs wear shoes. They can't bear the sight of their own feet without them. Now I understand. If you ever wish for shoes again, Helfer, I'll hit your feet. I will. No, no, mother, pray don't. Then don't you? But with such a big box on my head. A horrid scream followed, which Curdie interpreted as a reply to a blow from his mother upon the feet of her eldest goblin. Well, I never knew so much before, remarked a fourth voice. Your knowledge is not universal quite yet, said the father. You were only 50 last month. Mind you, see to the bed and the bedding. As soon as we've finished our supper, we'll be up and going. Ha, ha, ha. What are you laughing at, husband? I'm laughing to think what a mess the miners will find themselves in, somewhere before this day. 10 years. Why? What do you mean? Oh, nothing. Oh, yes, you do mean something. You always do mean something. It's more than you do, then, wife. That may be, but it's not more than I find out, you know. Ha ha, you're a sharp one. What a mother you've got, Helfer. Yes, father. Well, I suppose I must tell you. They're all at the palace, consulting about it tonight, and as soon as we've got away from this thin place, I'm going there to hear what night they fix upon. I should like to see that young ruffian there on the other side, struggling in the agonies of... He dropped his voice so low that Curdie could only hear a growl. The growl went on in this low bass for a good while, as inarticulate as if the goblin's tongue had been a sausage, and it was not until his wife spoke again that it rose to its former pitch. But what shall we do when you are at the palace? She asked. I will see you safe in the new house. I have been digging for you for the last 2 months. Podge, you mind the table and chairs. I commit them to your care. The table has 7 legs, each chair 3. I shall require them all at your hands. After this arose a confused conversation about the various household goods and their transport, and Curdie heard nothing more that was of any importance. He now knew at least one of the reasons for the constant sound of the goblin hammers and pickaxes at night. They were making new houses for themselves, to which they might retreat when the miners should threaten to break into their dwellings. But he had learned two things of far greater importance. The first was that some grievous calamity was preparing, and almost ready to fall upon the heads of the miners, and the second was one weak point of a goblin's body. He had not known that their feet were so tender as he had now reason to suspect. He had heard it said that they had no toes. He had never had opportunity of inspecting them closely enough in the dusk in which they always appeared, to satisfy himself whether it was a correct report. All right, it's 25 minutes, so we'll end here, and I'll pick up the next time. Top of the page. Lovely to see you again. Enjoy.